A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I welcome you to the sorting of characters in the Star Wars original trilogy. And yes, before you rush to the comments section, we all know the joke for Harry Potter, that it's just Star Wars with worse lightsabers, and it's not wrong, that's what makes it funny. We have two main protagonists who are orphaned as children, raised by their aunt and uncle after they're dropped off by a bearded mentor who will then one day let them know that they're capable of this ancient magic, but they won't be the ones to teach them that magic. That'll be a wiser weirdo in some other place, and then they'll have to fight a dark lord because of something that happened before they were born. But as somebody who loves both of these series, I know they're pretty similar. They're both versions of the hero's journey. That's why the joke exists, but I can also appreciate their differences. So that's why today I'm going to be sorting characters from the original Star Wars trilogy with my good friend here, the Sorting Hat, as we're going to see just how similar and different these characters are. So up first, we're going with our main protagonist, Luke Skywalker, the Harry Potter of the series, if you will. So, because of that, he's our main hero. I'm sure everybody's expecting me to pick Gryffindor here, but I'm not going to, actually. And it's not me questioning Luke's bravery or anything, but here's the thing about Skywalker men. They are not chivalrous.
I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
I don't like sand.
That line does work for Anakin, though. Huh. And Harry talks to Cho alone for the first time, and he's talking about the weather, too. Weird. But if I'm not putting Luke in Gryffindor, then what house am I going to be looking at? He's ambitious, definitely, but his plan for getting Han back from Jabba kind of shows he's not particularly cunning, otherwise it wouldn't have taken so long for him to get him back, and he's definitely loyal, shows that on Dagobah when he leaves Yoda in his training to save Han and Leia, even though it's a trap, but at the same time you can be looking at that as taking a shortcut, so if I'm ruling the other two out, I must be going with Ravenclaw.
What?
Okay, hear me out here. I think Luke's signature character trait is his ability to look beyond what's in front of him, to not take things at face value, to want something more. When he's on Tatooine, he wants more out of life than to just be a farmer like his uncle, and he's wanting that adventure. That's what he thinks he wants. And then when he's on Dagobah being trained by Yoda, he's asking him why. He's not just taking what the Grand Master is saying at face value. It's something that even frustrates Yoda because he believes it's something basic to being a Jedi. Which, not for nothing, this is also why Yoda doesn't want to train Luke in the first place. He doesn't think that he lives in the moment enough, that he just cares too much about the future.
Never his mind on where he was. What he was doing.
And the biggest example, of course, of him being able to look beyond is him seeing past Darth Vader to try to redeem his father. He doesn't do this out of some sense of loyalty because he never knew his father, and it's not like he's overcoming some sort of fear either. Once he learns that Vader is his father, he no longer sees the Sith Lord, he just sees his father. And while Luke isn't really your typical archetype for a Ravenclaw, he still does seek the truth, and at no point in the story is he really having to overcome any fears. He's not afraid to save Leia on the Death Star, and subsequently he's not afraid to try to blow it up. He's not afraid to fight Vader or disobey his masters to do so, and finally he's not afraid to try to redeem his father. So while Luke definitely compares to Harry if we're looking at these stories side to side, if we're looking at him for his house and what his character really is, he's kind of closer to characters who would be between Ravenclaw and Gryffindor. Hermione or McGonagall would be kind of your more first thoughts, but I'd argue he's more like Luna in a lot of ways, just because they're two characters who seek the truth and don't really ever show any fear. Plus, it's not like all Ravenclaws are your super smart, brainy, nerdy types.
Pretty obvious.
Yeah, that idiot was in Ravenclaw. Next up, we're going with the scruffy comic relief. The Ron Weasley, if you will. Han Solo.
Who's scruffy looking?
Geez, sorry, Han. Didn't mean to offend, but, this is one where that's about as surface level as the similarity gets. When we dive into both Ron and Han's characters, we see that they're pretty different, and when we consider a Hogwarts house and we're sorting someone, you have to not only consider their skills, but what do they value? For Han, that's one and the same, though. Han is very cunning. It comes with the territory and being a smuggler, but he's also cunning enough to stay off the Empire's radar multiple times in the original trilogy, and as far as his ambition goes, this is the life he always wanted when he was growing up on Corellia, as if he was born to be a smuggler. Stop being meta. And even though he's living the life he wanted, he still wants more out of life. Yes, of course, he has his debt to Jabba the Hutt also, so maybe he doesn't want to be a smuggler as much as he thought he did, but at the same time, he still decides he wants more, and he comes back, he saves Luke from Vader, they blow up the Death Star together, and he becomes a war hero.
Great kid! Don't get cocky!
Okay, let's keep it going with Leia Organa, and man, she is so many things. A princess, a senator, a general, rebel scum. She's basically the whole Breakfast Club.
Does that answer your question?
And for Leia, I'm going with Gryffindor because she, more than any of our other heroes, is about the fight. With Han, you question if he wants to be there, where do his loyalties lie? And Luke, before he learned of the Force, nearly joined the Imperial Academy. And she also has the ability to be much more chivalrous than our other heroes are because she's able to be a senator in both the New Republic and in the Empire, as she's able to convince her enemies that she's on their side. And yes, you can argue this is cunning more than chivalry, because it is, but at the same time we have to be considering what a character values rather than just their abilities. Because Leia isn't doing this for any personal gain, she's just doing this for the cause, to try to overthrow the Empire. If you were to look at it with Harry Potter characters, it's much more cunning in the way that Dumbledore is cunning rather than how Slughorn is cunning. Now next up we're going with Chewbacca, and I have a feeling you know where I'm going with this, because Chewie is totally a Hufflepuff. His loyalty is his defining character trait, and while he's loyal to Han first and foremost because of the life debt, he's still incredibly loyal to Luke and Leia as well. And this is a cool thing that we never really get in Harry Potter, because it's almost like the four founders are each having their representative as they all come together to try to overthrow the evil empire. We never get that in Harry Potter, and yeah, I know some people will think that I was trying to force that a little, but honestly, once I decided Luke was in Ravenclaw, the rest of it just fit perfectly. Next up, I'm going with Luke's mentors, starting with Old Ben, a man who gives 20 years of his life to protecting Luke because of how much he loved his parents, and even after his death still seeks to give him knowledge as he hopes that he can survive against the Sith and the Empire. Sounds like I'm describing a Hufflepuff there, doesn't it? Makes it even weirder that I'm actually going with Slytherin.
What?
That's right, I'm going with Slytherin because he intentionally deceived Luke by telling him that Vader betrayed and murdered his father. And I'm not saying this in a, oh, the Jedi were the real villains sort of way that kind of pops up every now and again. No, I still think he's a hero character, but he is still a Slytherin because he is intentionally deceiving Luke, just he's doing it for his best interests. He believes that Vader has to die for the Empire to fall and for Luke to win. So he knows that he will risk Luke turning to the dark side if he believes that he's killing his father, so instead he lies to him. It's kind of a cunning way to try to protect his soul here, but if you want full details on what Old Ben's plan was in the original trilogy, click on the card up here. And then we look at Yoda, and I think he's even more Slytherin-coded, to be honest with you. His time on Dagobah makes me think of the quote by Phineas Nigellus Black where he says that Slytherins are brave but not stupid, just to fight another day, as much as it's because of Yoda having a vision while fighting Sidious that he's not the one who will overthrow the Empire, but that he needs to be around to train them. Rules out Gryffindor pretty quickly, and I would say as his character goes, for as much as he accuses Luke of looking too much to the future, he really does look to the past a lot and almost clings to it. It's not as much out of loyalty either. It's more like this is the way things were. This is how they must always be. So I think it's pretty safe to say that Yoda's a Slytherin as well. And I just want to throw out there real quick that I think this is a pretty good example of why we can say that not all Slytherins are the villains. Over time that has kind of started to become more of a thing, but there are no good Slytherins in Harry Potter. It's good having a couple of them in a story like this where even though they're still flawed characters, that still makes them human, as opposed to in Harry Potter where it's just oh, Slytherin, that's a villain. But at the same time, I think the story would have been better if Ginny was put in Slytherin. I mean, my headcanon is that Hagrid was in Slytherin rather than Gryffindor, which is what the canon says. So I just wanted to throw this in there to just say, hey, not all Slytherins are villains. They have their strengths, they have their weaknesses. And I always think of the Ted Lasso quote, quoting John Obi-Wan Gandalf.
It is our choices, gentlemen, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities.
And up next, we're going to be looking at the droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO. And for R2, this feels like a pretty easy one. It feels like he's in Gryffindor, and I agree, he would be a Gryffindor. And this is such a weird thing to say about an astromech, especially because we wouldn't normally say this about any kind of robot or AI in a story, but man, that droid has guts. But I think what might be a little more questionable is that I'm going to be putting 3PO in Gryffindor as well. I know the instinct is to say, hey, he's a Ravenclaw, he's really smart, but I don't think that's really what drives him. And yes, he is loyal. I mean, he serves his maker for years before then serving his wife and then eventually their children for their entire lives. But I think Gryffindor fits the best because bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's having that fear and overcoming it anyway. And we know 3PO gets scared of a lot of things, but he is always in the middle of the fight anyways. Now, before I move on to our villains, there is one last hero I want to sort first, and that's Lando CalRIZZian. And I think it's a pretty safe bet on where we're going to put a man this chivalrous.
Hello, what have we here?
Yeah, Lando really puts the Riz in CalRIZZian, but I hear you saying, hey, he's really cunning. He's able to go toe-to-toe with Han even, and yes, he is, very much so, but even Han knows that he's the respectful one, so that's kind of what separates them a little bit, and it's not like Lando isn't brave, he's the one who leads the mission going into the second Death Star, but, at the end of the day, it's totally his chivalry is why he is a Gryffindor.
Good lad.
Ooh, thank the maker she's wearing a glove there. Lando's so smooth that without protection she could get pregnant from just that. Now, we're finally moving on to our villains here, and I'm going to be starting with Tarkin. And I think we can pretty quickly rule out both Gryffindor and Ravenclaw on this one, and I know the instinct is to just put him in Slytherin and go on to the next one, but I do at least want to consider the idea that he's a Hufflepuff. Tarkin is extremely loyal to the Emperor. He was loyal to him even when he was still Chancellor, and he can't get to his position without being extremely hardworking. I mean, he's commanding the Death Star here, and is able to give Vader orders without Vader just killing him. And I think if you look at just the movies and the TV shows, I think you can argue that Tarkin is a Hufflepuff, or at the very least a hat stall, which, for those of you who don't know or need a reminder, is when the hat takes longer than 5 minutes to decide what house to put you in. But once you look at the Tarkin book by James Luceno, you can see just how cunning he is and how much he values it too, which just makes it easy to put him in Slytherin. He never confirms either of these things because he knows that to know them is a death sentence from either Vader or the Emperor, but he's able to figure out that Darth Vader was once Anakin Skywalker and that the Emperor is a Sith Lord. Now, there's no upside to him knowing these things, but he's still smart enough to figure it out, and even smarter because he knows not to reveal them, that if he says it to Vader or the Emperor, that they'll kill him in a second for it, so instead he just dutifully serves them and is loyal to the Emperor because he'll get more power from them. And for the Emperor, this is an obvious one. He's clearly a Slytherin. Hat doesn't even have to touch his head for that one to be shouted out. But at the same time, though, he does have the arrogance that is usually associated more with Gryffindor House. Not that anyone would accuse the Slytherins of being a humble bunch.
He disagrees. He thinks he won't last 5.
Man, if I had a nickel for every time a character in Harry Potter dropped out of a tree to make an entrance, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but man, that's weird that it happens twice in Goblet of Fire. And just to give the ultimate example of the Emperor's arrogance, let's look at his plan in Return of the Jedi. Fun fact, the forest moon of Endor is one of 9 moons that surrounds the planet Endor, or Tana as it's sometimes called depending on the source material. So, what the Emperor could have done is put the real shield generator for the Death Star on any one of those 9 moons, and then put a fake one on a different moon, so that that's the one that gets leaked to the rebels. Then they can't destroy the real shield generator no matter how much they may succeed, you know? Not particularly related to the video, just wanted to get that off my chest, though I suppose if you're down to like Ravenclaw or Slytherin with the Emperor, then that helps rule out Ravenclaw. And now for the main event, Darth Vader. This was the toughest one for me to decide and would definitely be a hat stall, and if I was going to compare him to another character who was also a hat stall in Harry Potter, it would be Peter Pettigrew, aka Wormtail. For those of you who aren't Harry Potter fans, Peter is a coward who is sorted into Gryffindor, which feels like it shouldn't happen, but at the same time, he's almost put there as a last resort, because he's not brave, he's definitely not loyal, he's not smart, and while he has moments of cunning, he has no aspirations beyond surviving his bullies. He's really only put in Gryffindor because of how much he values bravery, even though he has none. And we can apply this same logic to Vader, because immediately we can say he's not loyal. I know this is a video about the original trilogy, but at the same time, Vader has wanted to overthrow the Emperor for over 20 years at the time we get to Return of the Jedi, and even in what could be Luke's final moments before the Emperor kills him, Vader is torn on whether or not he's going to save him, so he ultimately is loyal to Luke, but it's not an immediate reaction either. And we can also immediately rule out him being brave. You know, everything that Vader becomes is because of fear. Fear was the path to the dark side for Anakin Skywalker. And the only time he ever cared about gaining knowledge was when he thought it could save Padme's life. You know, even after the Empire rises and the Jedi Order falls, he oversees the plundering and burning of the archives, but he just gives all the information to Palpatine. You know, that doesn't really sound like what a Dark Ravenclaw would do. And I wouldn't describe Vader as cunning either, you know, he's a blunt instrument, just pure power that very few can actually deal with, you know, he doesn't have to be cunning, because he doesn't have many people who are as powerful as he is, you know, even in Empire, I don't really know what his plan was if Luke had joined him, but I can't imagine it being the kind of coup that would lead to a smooth transition from one emperor to another. I imagine it would be a more straightforward attack that would then lead to civil war from Palpatine's loyalists. So if he doesn't have the abilities that immediately would associate him with any particular house, then we have to ask, what does he value? You know, what does Vader want most? Well, in Empire, he just comes out and says it. He wants to rule the galaxy with Luke as father and son, just like he had wanted to rule the galaxy with Padme 20 years earlier. And this sounds like it would be him being aspirational, but I think that's just the power seeking that comes with the dark side. I think what this really shows is that he wants that connection. He wants family. So I would say that Darth Vader is a Hufflepuff. When you think about it, Darth Vader is the only Sith Lord who wants to rule with somebody else. The rest of them all just want power for themselves. They want to kill their masters and use their apprentices. So Vader really kind of separates himself, that he wants to share this power. You know, it's not all ambition for him. At the end of the day, what he wants is his family. It's something that is buried deep down in the part of him that's Anakin Skywalker, the part that he tries to ignore for years, the part that he thought died on Mustafar with Padme, but it's still there, and the Sorting Hat would still be able to see that, just like Luke was able to see that, and it's why he's able to turn back to the light side of the Force, because deep down, what he craves is family, people who will be loyal to him no matter what, not because he's useful to them, not because he saves them, because of him. He just wants connection and family. So even though he would try to deny it, and that the Emperor would be questioning why he wouldn't be a Slytherin, that's why Darth Vader is a Hufflepuff. How's that for a slice of fried gold? Let me know down in the comments where you agree and disagree on these sortings, or if there are any other characters in the original trilogy that you feel I left out. Obviously, I didn't want this video to be too long, so let me know down in the comments what you think of them. Maybe we'll do a part 2 for this. I'll also probably do a prequel or maybe a sequel version, so if there are any characters you want to see me comment on for that, drop it down below. Maybe if these do well enough, I'll do the Clone Wars also. So that's all I got for you guys today. So if you enjoyed, please drop a like, subscribe if you want more like this, and I'll see you next time on STV.